NASA finally tests the F-47 supersonic jet. The results were jaw-dropping. The radar screen was empty. Silence. Then in 0.4 seconds, 12 bogies materialized 80 miles from the carrier group, Chinese J-36, invisible until they wanted to be seen. The USS Ronald Reagan's air defense commander reached for the scramble button, but his hand froze because something else appeared on thermal imaging, a ghost moving at Mach 2.8 without afterburners, closing the distance like a bullet fired from God's own chamber. The F-47 wasn't supposed to be operational until 2028. That timeline just died. Because what NASA and Boeing tested 3 weeks ago in the Nevada desert didn't just break records, it shattered the entire concept of aerial warfare. And China's military leadership? They've gone silent, completely silent. Beijing has been counting days, not years, days, because their invasion window for Taiwan closes the moment America deploys a weapon system that renders their entire 6th-generation program obsolete. The South China Sea has become a chessboard where one wrong move triggers global war. Chinese destroyers circle the Spratly Islands. Russian submarines probe Gyuk Gap defenses. And Iran? They've been watching, learning, waiting for the moment American air superiority cracks. The domino effect is simple. Lose air dominance over Taiwan, and Japan falls into Beijing's sphere. Japan falls, and South Korea recalculates its alliances. South Korea wavers, and the entire Indo-Pacific defense architecture collapses. Then, it's not about territorial disputes anymore. It's about whether democracies survive the next 50 years. The F-22 Raptor held the line for 2 decades. The F-35 Lightning convinced adversaries that challenging American skies meant suicide. But Russia's S-400 systems have been upgraded. China's quantum radar prototypes claim to detect stealth signatures thought impossible to track. The technological edge that kept carrier groups safe? Shrinking. Fast. The Manhattan Project of the Skies. March 2025. President Trump stared at 3 defense contractors promising miracles. Lockheed Martin pitched AI-driven swarm coordination. Raytheon Technologies promised hypersonic integration. But Boeing walked in with something that made Air Force generals forget how to breathe. A penetrating counter-air vehicle capable of operating 1,200 nautical miles deep into enemy territory. Alone. Without tanker support. Without loyal wingmen. Without backup. The $20 billion price tag made congressional accountants choke. But Major General Joseph Kungal delivered the assessment that ended all debate. There was no more viable option than this to achieve air superiority in highly contested environments. Translation: build this or surrender the Pacific. The F-47 promised capabilities that sounded like science fiction. Multispectral signature reduction that defeats radar, infrared, acoustic, and visual detection simultaneously. Adaptive propulsion systems generating supersonic cruise speeds without the heat signature that dooms conventional fighters. Autonomous drone command allowing one pilot to control 40 unmanned combat vehicles in coordinated strikes. This wasn't an aircraft. It was a flying supercomputer wrapped in a stealth profile so advanced that enemy defense networks wouldn't register its existence until missiles were already airborne. China's nightmare response. August 5th, 2025. Chinese social media erupted. Photos flooded WeChat, showing a tailless prototype with swept wings and a distinctive W-shaped trailing edge. Defense analysts recognized it instantly. The J-36, or maybe the J-50, depending on whether Beijing designed it for air superiority or deep penetration strikes. Either way, the message was clear. China hadn't been sitting idle. While America celebrated Boeing's contract victory, they'd been building their own 6th-generation monster, and intelligence estimates suggested operational deployment by 2030, 5 years ahead of America's original F-47 timeline. The aircraft's design incorporated stealth geometries that suggested Chinese engineers had solved thermal management problems still plaguing American designers. The pointed nose, cropped wingtips, and blended fuselage weren't just aesthetic choices. They were solutions to radar cross-section challenges that required computational modeling beyond what most nations possessed. Beijing had reportedly invested over $40 billion in quantum computing, specifically to accelerate aerodynamic testing, and the evidence suggested it worked. But the truly terrifying detail emerged from satellite imagery of Chengdu Aerospace Corporation's testing facilities. The J-36 wasn't a single prototype. Intelligence sources counted at least 7 airframes in various stages of assembly. China wasn't experimenting. They were preparing for mass production. Let's simulate October 12th, 2027. The Taiwan Strait. 03 or 40 hours. Chinese amphibious assault groups have launched from Fujian ports. Taiwanese F-16Vs scramble to intercept. They last 4 minutes before J-20 escorts eliminate them with PL-15 long-range missiles. The USS Carl Vinson carrier group repositions, preparing to launch F-35C sorties. But Chinese DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missiles are already in flight, forcing the carrier to defensive maneuvering. This is the scenario American war planners have nightmared about for decades. The moment where conventional superiority isn't enough. The moment where carrier groups become sitting targets instead of mobile fortresses. Then the F-47 enters the theater. Launched from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, 1,800 miles away. No tanker support. No escort fighters. Just pure, concentrated lethality, moving at speeds that make interception nearly impossible. The pilot, call sign Reaper 6, doesn't manually control the engagement. The F-47's AI coordination system has already identified 73 priority targets: J-36 fighters, HQ-9 surface-to-air missile batteries, and early warning radar installations. Weapon bay doors open. But instead of missiles, autonomous drones deploy. 40 of them, each carrying electronic warfare payloads and kinetic strike munitions. Chinese radar operators see nothing. Their screens show empty sky. Then the drones activate. Jamming frequencies flood communication networks. GPS signals scramble, target acquisition systems fail. And in the chaos, the F-47 fires. AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missiles streak toward Chinese fighters, still trying to understand why their sensors just went blind. The engagement lasts 11 minutes. 17 J-36 destroyed. 23 ground targets eliminated. 0 American losses. Reaper 6 turns back toward Guam. Fuel reserves still at 40%. The invasion attempt collapsing. Because without air cover, Chinese amphibious forces become floating targets for Taiwanese anti-ship missiles. Congress initially recoiled at the numbers. $60 billion total program, cost for 185 aircraft. That's $324 million per F-47, triple the cost of an F-35. But the alternative calculation was simpler and far more terrifying. What's the economic cost of losing Taiwan? The island produces 92% of the world's advanced semiconductors. Losing it means losing the technological backbone of modern civilization. No smartphones, no computers, no AI development. Global GDP contracts by an estimated $3 trillion in the first year alone. The F-47 wasn't just a military investment. It was an insurance policy against economic Armageddon. And when framed that way, $60 billion started looking like a bargain. But the program's true cost extends beyond budget spreadsheets. Boeing had to construct entirely new manufacturing facilities with security protocols exceeding anything previously implemented. Supply chains for exotic materials required partnerships with only the most trusted allies. Australia provided rare earth elements. Japan contributed advanced composite manufacturing. The United Kingdom shared quantum encryption technologies for secure communications. The F-47 wasn't just an American aircraft. It was a symbol of Allied unity against authoritarian expansion. Every dollar spent reinforced relationships that held the democratic world together. Russia watched the F-47 development with barely concealed panic. Their MiG-41 interceptor program, previously considered a distant possibility, suddenly received funding increases that strained an already war-depleted economy. The Sukhoi Design Bureau was ordered to accelerate Pack-A-Day bomber development to provide at least some counter to American sixth-generation capabilities. Even America's allies felt the pressure. The Global Combat Air Program joint initiative between the United Kingdom, Japan, and Italy shifted into emergency mode. Their Tempest fighter, originally scheduled for 2035 deployment, now targeted 2030. France, Germany, and Spain responded by pouring resources into their future combat air system, determined not to become strategically irrelevant. The arms race that began as an American response to Chinese expansion had metastasized into something far more dangerous. A global competition where every nation with aerospace capabilities felt compelled to develop weapon systems they could barely afford, just to avoid being left behind. The Cold War nuclear standoff at least had predictable rules. Mutually assured destruction created stability through fear. But sixth-generation fighters operate in a gray zone where first strike advantages could be overwhelming. The nation that achieves operational supremacy first gains the ability to cripple adversaries before they can respond, and that creates hair-trigger instability, a misidentified radar signature, a communication breakdown, a regional commander making a split-second decision. Any of these could trigger escalations that make previous world wars look restrained. The results from NASA's test 3 weeks ago weren't just impressive, they were paradigm-shattering. The F-47 prototype sustained Mach 2.8 for 47 minutes without afterburners. Its radar cross-section measured smaller than a hummingbird. Drone coordination systems controlled 63 autonomous vehicles simultaneously during live-fire exercises. But the detail that made Pentagon officials go pale: the AI decision-making speed. When presented with complex tactical scenarios, the F-47's onboard systems formulated response strategies 340 times faster than human pilots. We're not just witnessing aircraft evolution, we're watching the obsolescence of human aerial combat. The F-47 can operate entirely autonomously. The pilot becomes a supervisor, not a controller. And that raises questions military ethicists still can't answer. When AI makes life and death decisions in microseconds, who bears responsibility for mistakes? When autonomous systems engage targets without human confirmation, where do we draw the line between defense and murder? These aren't theoretical concerns anymore. They're operational realities that will define warfare for the next century. China's J-36 reportedly has similar autonomous capabilities. Russia's next-generation programs promise AI integration. The race isn't just about who builds the fastest or stealthiest aircraft. It's about who trusts machines to make decisions that could trigger global war. Taiwan remains the flashpoint. The South China Sea remains contested. Eastern Europe remains volatile. But the calculus has changed. The F-47's test results have forced Beijing to recalculate invasion timelines. Intelligence sources suggest Chinese military leadership has delayed Taiwan operation planning by at least 18 months. Not because they've abandoned ambitions, because they need time to counter capabilities they didn't expect America to field this soon. Russia's response has been equally telling. Bomber patrols near NATO airspace have decreased by 40% since news of the F-47's performance leaked. Provocative fighter intercepts have dropped even more dramatically. Adversaries aren't backing down. They're recalibrating, waiting for the moment when their own sixth-generation programs reach parity. And that moment will come. The question is, what happens when both sides possess weapon systems capable of devastating first strikes? When every nation has aircraft that can penetrate any defense and eliminate targets before warning systems activate, when the margin for error disappears completely. The F-47 has bought America time, perhaps a decade, maybe more. But it's also accelerated a technological arms race that makes nuclear proliferation look manageable by comparison. Because nukes required massive infrastructure and left clear signatures. Sixth-generation fighters can strike from anywhere, at any time, with almost no warning. We've entered an age where air supremacy determines national survival, where the skies aren't just a battlefield. They're the ultimate high ground, and whoever controls them controls everything below. The F-47 test results were jaw-dropping, but the world they're creating, that's the real shock. The question isn't whether these aircraft will change everything. It's whether we're ready